Now, in this video, I want to take you through a little bit more on the CRO Insight Service to explain why you should actually start looking at the CRO Insight Service in the first place, who it is actually a good fit for, how it actually works, and also importantly, what do you actually get at the end of the process. Now, I think the first thing to say is that in terms of people that are looking at this for their business, it's important to note that really when we're thinking about e-commerce brands, we believe there are three things that really drive the growth in a business, and that what we call the Buy Trifecta, which is on the screen right now. This is ultimately when we are thinking about e-commerce, the principle that look, as a business owner or as a business operator selling on through e-commerce, you either need to get your customers to buy now, buy more, or buy again. And ultimately, at the moment, you are probably in one of these situations whereby one of these things maybe isn't working as well as the other two. Maybe all three need some work, or maybe actually at the moment you're just not quite sure. And that is ultimately why you're looking at the CRO Insight service. For us, in terms of CRO, what we believe is that the interaction between the buy now, the buy more, and buy again is really where the magic happens from a CRO perspective. And what it's about doing is about unlocking that white space you can see in the middle of the screen there and working out how we best optimize that to make sure that ultimately with people buying now, buying more, and buying again, you get more revenue and ultimately more profit into your business. I think the other important thing to say at this stage is that if you are saying, well, actually, look, we have a little bit of understanding about maybe where we are, we maybe know that our conversion rates are not what they used to be, or indeed actually as well, they are not maybe tracking against some benchmarks that you found. All of that information can actually be researched and actually analyzed by us as well. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, look, we kind of got some of this already, that's great, but we can make sure we do the full piece for you, whereby what we're doing in the CRO Insight service is firstly analyzing exactly where you are, and then secondly, the things that you need to do to get you to a point where actually you can move forward. Now, with the CRO Insight service, what you also probably want to know is, well, what does it actually look like? How does it work? What is my involvement as a brand owner, as an e-commerce director, or as someone working within an organization? And the way that it works is very much like this on screen. Now, when we do a CRO Insight service, we break this down initially into the parts where we are initially getting access to the store. Now, from your perspective, that is very light touch. You'll probably need to commit about 30 to 40 minutes, absolute maximum, to give us access to each of those tools that you can see on the screen here. Ultimately, some of those you may not have access, depending on what platform you're working with. But if you provide us with access to those, we can then get the information that we then need to make sure we can analyze exactly what is going on site. The next part there with onboarding, again, is very, very quick. What we want to do in the onboarding stage is make sure that we have a very clear picture and understanding of your business and your strategy, as well as any priorities that you have. Now, of course, you probably most likely have spoken to myself, to Peter, my business partner, or our managing director, Kelly. But equally as well, we need to make sure that our team has a very clear understanding too of what it is that you want to achieve in your business in the next 6 to 12 months. And the onboarding process here consists of a pretty simple to use questionnaire, which will get some information about your business that we can then use to guide us when it comes to the analysis that we do. We then go into the CRO Insight service, and depending on whether what data you have already, usually this will take between 3 to 4 weeks. And in that process, what we're going to be doing then is coming up with those recommendations for the site based on your actual data. And then with that then too, we will then prioritize those using the PECTI method, which I'm going to go into in a moment. Once that's then done, we will then be able to provide that back to you. We'll be able to walk you through each of the prioritized actions for the site, and then you then have a decision to make. Is this something that you then take internally and then go and implement? Is it something that you do in collaboration with us where we do some of the implementation and you take some of it? Or is it actually something that whereby we do the whole lot for you in terms of the design, development, and the strategy implementation? But the great point is that you have a decision point to make there, and you can then make a call on what's going to be best for your business at that moment in time. But if you do decide to continue working with this and implement, we will then be reporting with you month to month, usually initially on a 3-month basis to implement that. And once that's then been done, it gives you an opportunity to see what the impact of our work has been to that point. Now, After this, I guess we've looked at the high level here. Getting into the detail is probably where is going to be most useful. And I think probably to do that, rather than go into each of these individual stages in more depth, what I prefer to do is go to some of the key inflection points. And the key inflection point for me that I want to talk to you about is PECTI. Now, PECTI is our prioritization formula, which looks a little bit like this. And what PECTI does is that it gives us an opportunity to be able to rank each of the recommendations that we come up for you in an order that means you have a good understanding of what is most important and is also what is least important. Proof, ease, cost, time, and impact. And what we do here is that we rank each of those out of 5: proof, ease, cost, time, and impact. And then we roll those up into a score. So what happens is that all of the A/B tests, all of the recommendations that we have for you are presented back to you. And we show you those in a sheet that looks a little bit something like this. Now, what you can see here is that each of these items on the left-hand side are ideas for A/B tests or are ideas for implementation, are then ranked out of a score of 100. And as you can see, as it goes down the screen, the number gets less and less. And equally, the score for each of these is then given across the screen. This just means that when we decide on actually what is going to be next for you guys and help you make your plan, regardless of who's going to be implementing that, you have a very clear view of what should be implemented first and what should be implemented later. So it just means, again, that you are not going to be in a position whereby you're saying, look, there's loads of great stuff that we need to do, but how are we actually going to do it? So that gives you a bit of an idea then in terms of, I guess, the next phase of, well, once we do the audit, what does it then look like from a point of view of getting that ready to be in a state whereby we can then actually start using it? Now, I think what's probably also important for me to do at this stage is to give you a real example of, well, what do you actually get? And in terms of the outputs on this, you are going to get a few things from us. The first thing that's going to happen is going to be your CRO Insights call. Now, in your CRO Insights call, you're going to be joined by me or Kelly or Peter to walk you through with your lead strategist on your Insight service of the key things that we believe are of most importance to you and your site. What does this mean is that at the end of that meeting, you will have a very clear understanding of what needs to be done as the highest priority. So after that meeting, you can then immediately start taking action. Equally, with that meeting, we will also walk you through the other recommendations that we have for the site. Now, typically when we do this, you will have between about 50 and 60 recommendations for the site, which usually gives the brands that we work with a roadmap of between about 4 to 6 months, depending on how fast you can A/B test, depending on your traffic. But as a good indicator, 4 to 6 months, I believe, is a good idea to have with that. When it comes to the rest of the implementations of what we have for you, we also have the CRO Insights report. Now, what this does is it is a very visual document that gives you the opportunity to see exactly what we've recommended, why we've recommended it, and exactly what you can then do with that information to get to a point whereby you can start using it. Now, what I'm going to do at this stage then is give you a little example of one we have here. Now, this is a hypothetical example from a company called CoffeeCo. What you can see here is that we start off with this report and we give you some insights, broad brush in terms of the data. So we tell you what the data is then saying. Now, as we proceed through this, what we then do is give you what we believe are the most important things. In terms of this particular example, we're giving you an example from the heat map that we found on the mobile version of the site. We are then also giving a little bit more information. And then we are then giving you a visual example of what we believe should be done and an idea associated with that particular implementation. We've given some data here too about what the impact of doing that particular thing will be. And that then is the structure that we use throughout the course of this whole output. So what it means for you is that, again, regardless of who decides to implement this, there is something that you can go on. There is a guide that can be used that can then be taken forward and implemented. Now, if we just scroll through this, you can see here there are lots of recommendations about different sections of the site, each again with a visual example, and again with a defined, this is what you need to do when it comes to each of these particular parts. Now, if we go right to the end of this document, as you can see, it is quite an extensive one, so lots of information to be drawn upon. There is then equally here then a summary of the recommendations. Now, within here, you have the actual task, the hypothesis, the category for that, the type, whether it's an implementation, analysis, or A/B test, and then the overall impact on metrics that we believe should be there. And this goes through for every single one of the recommendations that we make. So hopefully at this point, what you'll see is, look, the process that we're going through, yes, is quite involved. It is in depth, but it is going to give you a very clear view of what needs to happen with the site that you have, or the number of sites that you're working on, if it's the case that you are a multi-site brand. Now, the other thing that I want to show you here again is another sheet that we provide, which is called our PECTI sheet. Now, this goes into a little bit more detail from a granular level of each of those recommendations that we made, and equally then with that, what needs to be done. Now, with the PECTI sheet, what you can see here again is that each of the actions that need to be performed are over on the left-hand side. And what we can see as we go down here again is a task description. There is a task ID. And then here again, we have a score for each of the different elements as well. And as we go down the screen, we can see that the score of each of those things then starts to decline. So again, it just means that from a working process, this is what's going to happen. We initially will start off with getting you onboarded and making sure we have the right access to your store. Once that's then done, we are then going to dive into the data and analyze exactly what customers are doing and aren't doing. And with that, then come up with a range of recommendations for the site, which will be both analyses, A/B tests, and implementations. And with that done, we would then rank those using our PECTI formula to make sure that the most important ones are at the top and the least important ones are at the bottom. Once all that's then done, you can then decide whether you want to implement these yourselves, implement them part with Blend, or have Blend implement all of these actually by ourselves and run your CRO implementation program for you.